All right, welcome to this deep dive on the shifting international order. If you're studying for an exam, you're in the right place. We're going to break down the core concepts, the key theories, and the critical examples you absolutely need to know to master this topic. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics, what an international order even is. Then we'll look at the system built after World War II, explore the new challenges it's facing today, and finally, we'll dig into the big debate about its future. Okay, first things first. Any exam on this is going to start with one simple question. What exactly is an international order? I mean, really think about it. You've got all these independent countries. What stops the world from just falling into total chaos all the time? Well, the answer to that question is this idea of an international order. For your exam, this is the definition you need. An international order is basically the rule book for the world. It's the set of institutions, norms, and arrangements that countries agree to, more or less, to keep things stable and peaceful. Now, the system that has dominated the world for the last 80 years or so, and the one you'll definitely be tested on, is called the liberal institutional order. It basically rose from the ashes of World War II. And the LIO wasn't an accident. Not at all. It was designed on purpose, mostly by the United States and its allies, with one huge goal in mind: to create a system so stable that another world war would be unthinkable. You have got to know these three pillars. First, economic liberalism. This promoted free markets and created giants like the IMF and the World Bank. Second, you have liberal institutionalism, which is the big idea that international bodies like the UN could solve global problems. And third, political liberalism, which pushed for democracy and human rights as goals for everyone. Now, for a system like this to work, it kind of needed a manager, and the US stepped right into that role, becoming what we call the hegemon. It used its massive economic and military power to keep things stable. But, and this is key, it was a liberal hegemony, so it also created institutions where it had special perks, like that famous veto power at the UN Security Council. So that US-led order worked pretty well for decades. But today, it's facing its biggest challenge yet. Think about it. As countries like China, India, and the other BRICS nations have exploded economically, their ambitions have grown too. They're no longer happy just playing by rules that were written after a war they weren't really part of. They want a seat at the head table, and they want to help write the new rules. And they do this in a few clever ways. First, they use economic soft power, like China's huge Belt and Road Initiative. Second, they push for more votes and more say inside the old institutions, like the IMF. And third, when that doesn't work, they just go and build their own alternatives. And this is where things get really fascinating. Instead of just trying to change the US-led World Bank, China went ahead and created the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB. The idea was to create a direct alternative, one that could fund big projects faster and maybe with different priorities. It's a parallel system in the making. And please remember, this isn't just a battle between the big guys. A lot of developing nations, what we often call the global south, have felt left out for a long, long time. They see this shift as a huge opportunity to finally create a more inclusive world that actually represents their interests too. So, all this pressure leads to the biggest question of all. Is the old order about to collapse, or is it going to adapt? Well, there are two major theories that give us competing answers. The whole debate really boils down to this. The realist perspective says that as the US loses power, the world is going to get more dangerous and chaotic. But the liberal view argues that the institutions themselves, the rules, the shared benefits, are actually strong enough to survive, even without one single country in charge. And a key argument for that liberal view comes from a scholar named John Eikenberry. His point is, hey, it's way easier for a rising power like China to just join the existing club and gain influence from the inside, rather than trying to burn it all down and build a whole new global system from scratch. That's a huge risk. So what does this all mean for you? The conclusion seems to be that we're seeing an evolution, not a revolution. The era of the US calling all the shots might be ending, but the order itself seems to be bending and adapting to a new reality with multiple powerful players. Now, before we do a final recap, just remember that this is a really complex topic. If you want to fully master it and be totally prepared for your exam, the full summary and a bunch of practice tests are waiting for you at gradeguru.nl. All right, let's lock in the absolute essential points you need to take away from this for your exam. First, remember the US-built LILO has been the bedrock of our world since 1945. Second, its biggest challengers today are rising powers and the global south, who think the system is out of date. Third, their strategy is a one-two punch, reform the old institutions while building new ones. And finally, the system seems to be bending, not breaking, and moving toward a future with multiple great powers. And that leaves us with the big, open question for the future. Can a world with many leaders be as stable as a world with just one? That's the debate that's shaping our world as we speak. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and good luck with your studies.